Hey, thank you for being here. I aspire to share whatever ideas come up for me, and I also find so much love and connection and knowledge in nature that I'd love to share. In this video, I want to share with you why I forage and also how to forage and how to learn new things to forage and how to familiarize yourself with the environment that's around you. So the reason why I forage is because I think alongside other things, for me it's such a lovely way to reconnect with the natural world around me. I also grew up in the countryside and we relied on a good portion of our food from our garden. So I think there's just that connection inside of me to the land that I formed from such an early age, and it just makes sense for me to connect to my roots in that way. And especially because I don't have a garden, so I can't grow any of my own food, but there is things to forage around me. And of course I can buy things from the shop and not bother at all, but I think for me I just want to reconnect and stay connected to the earth. So while I can't rely fully on foraging, it's just such a nice way to add the wild to my plate on the day-to-day if I can. I also want to learn the ways of processing food that I feel like have been left behind. I would have grown up watching my grandma making jams and pickling all sorts of things, and I feel like connecting with wild food, you have to preserve it to keep it for longer, and there are things that I want to learn too. Yeah, it's something that I feel like is important to me. Overall, I think it's a way that I want to learn and reconnect with our earth again. I think for me it also makes so much sense to eat something that has been recently touched by the soil and by the elements and by the wind, by the sun, by the ecosystem around, and food that has just been interacting with the ecosystem around. I think it just makes a lot of sense for me to bring that into my home and to make that a part of my life. I also think that reconnecting to our earth right now in this way, and reconnecting to our earth not just through foraging but through all sorts of interactions, from a walk in the woods to having your bare feet on the grass or on the soil. I think it's such a radical thing to do in a time where it feels like everything is here to distract us and disconnect us, and disconnect us from ourselves, from each other, and from the earth. So it feels radical in a way to be reconnecting in this way. It feels strange, and I think part of me feels strange sharing this because it feels a little bit radical in a way. But there is so many ways that we can reconnect. There's been studies that even simply just having a window that has nature outside, a bit of greenery outside, has been helpful for people in all sorts of scenarios, from hospitals to offices. And even simply walking in the woods, or something like foraging or swimming in the sea or walking barefoot, all of those things just seem to reconnect us and have a pretty positive impact on us, and that makes sense because we are nature. So I think it can be a bit of a funny way to put it that way sometimes, because of course those things are going to benefit us because we are part of the natural world, and we seem to have forgotten that. So I think that's maybe why I'm also finding it important to share this, is that, I think that's another reason why part of me really wants to share this. I want to share a great book that touches on the different ways that we can connect again to the earth, and it's called The Green Cure. It's this book here. I still have a good bit to go through, but it basically touches on like the different ways that you can connect, from like a window to all the other things that I said, like being in the woods, foraging, swimming, all sorts of things. But I think this is a nice one that touches on a couple of things. And it touches on like how it benefits us. So it talks about like different things like oxytocin, our nervous system, and all of those things, and how when we interact with a natural environment, we often find many benefits in it. Now on to how do I actually know what to forage, because there's obviously so much out there that you come across in your everyday walks and in your environment. There's a couple of things that have really given me a lot of knowledge. One of the things is going to local foraging events. So depending on where you live, you might have people locally that have events teaching you how to forage, which is so helpful to have somebody there that knows, especially when you're beginning, and even after you know and gain knowledge. I think it's still helpful to go to these events, because they'll teach you maybe a new way to process a food, or just a new thing to forage that you wouldn't have known about before. And I think it's such a safe way to build up confidence. But I think that has really helped me. And you can just look up online like local foraging events near me, and you'll find all sorts. Probably it depends where you live, but in the two places that I've lived so far, I found foragers near me that held events. The other way to gain foraging knowledge is, I think, through videos, and there's so many good videos out there on YouTube on foraging for beginners, whether it be with like plants or mushrooms or trees. And while I wouldn't rely fully on it, I think it's such a great way to attain knowledge. I've learned so much of my knowledge from there, and while I wouldn't use YouTube by itself, it can really give you a lot of knowledge on what to forage, how to identify it, and there's just a lot of information out there. One of the ones that I look at quite often is, it's called Wild Food UK, and I'm gonna add that in the description below. But that one has helped me a lot. Like, from mushrooms to plants to trees, they really cover a lot. But that's in the UK, and I think it applies a lot to Ireland. I'm not too sure how much it applies to other countries. I just don't know. Like, for example, if some of the things that they're sharing there, I'm not sure. Like, some places in Europe might have like more species of that, or more lookalikes, or I'm not too sure. But they've been quite helpful for Ireland and the UK. But there are a lot of other people there teaching you how to forage from different countries, from different countries too. So there is a vast amount of knowledge there that you can learn from. There's also guides online which can be so helpful too. So if you look up, say, Guide to Foraging Nettles, or anything else that you're interested in, there's guides that are going to cover all the details, all the points of like how to identify a plant, and then it has pictures and just loads of helpful information. So I think guides alongside YouTube videos when you're still confused, because sometimes you look at videos, I've looked at videos before and then I've been outside and looked at those same things and I was like, I'm actually not sure anymore. So I think YouTube videos with guides, with workshops, have been so helpful. But then of course, ultimately, one of the main ways to really gain knowledge is by being outside. Because as I said, sometimes like I would have found things online, but once I get out there, there's just like other lookalikes, and you see the different colours that are around and you're like, okay, now this is a lot. So I think being outside is really helpful to practice your green fingers and to see what's around. So I think, yeah, being outside with the trees, plants, and the fungi as you're gaining all this knowledge to just familiarize yourself with what's around. And when I'm outside, I have a couple of books that I want to share with you that I'll bring out to ID plants that I found really helpful. So the first book that I find really helpful when I ID is this one here. So this is The Wildflowers of Ireland. It's really helpful to, like, if you're outside looking at a flower and you want to ID a flower, if you go through this book by colours and yeah, you try to ID it that way. It takes a little while as well to adjust to using these guides, but you basically just flicker through, and there's, as I said, the colours to help you, and then you look at the shape of the leaves. You look, sometimes it like has a certain number of petals and just different features that will help you to ID it. And this plant is really helpful, but it also has so much food that I learned how to forage. And again, I wouldn't just rely entirely on one thing. I think going back and forth between foraging events with somebody that knows, looking loads of things up on YouTube, and then having these ID guides when you're outside with you can be really helpful. Like, for example, this book would have a handful of things that I forage, which would be like nettles, sea beet. Yeah, this book has taught me a good few of the things that I can forage. And it also, if I'm outside and I'm not 100% sure about something, as I said, you could be like maybe getting a lot of information from online or from events, but then when you're out by yourself, this is such a helpful book to have outside with you to just confirm what you're looking at. I did first, before getting the Wildflowers of Ireland, I got this book here, which is British Wildlife, and it goes through it covers animals, it covers loads of different animals, it covers different plants, it covers fungi. I think it even covers rock, maybe different rocks. I found this in a second-hand shop, but I didn't find it comprehensive enough on, like, I would have used this book, went outside, and I was like, oh, I can't find this particular plant in the book, or the pictures. I wasn't too sure about the pictures. They weren't as clear, some of them weren't, but it was still really helpful. And I think it was helpful to like look at like a mixture of stuff, like if you're finding different animals that you're curious about, or different, like, I think it has like different butterflies or bugs that you find. So if you're interested, I think, on like the ecosystem as a whole, books like that are really nice. And then I have this little pocket guide for mushrooms, which is actually quite comprehensive, I find. It touches sometimes on like the lookalikes that look like that particular mushroom that might be poisonous. It tells you if they're edible, it tells you if they're poisonous. But again, with mushrooms, you want to be pretty careful when you're starting out, and like don't eat stuff unless you're like 100% sure. But to go along as well, I think with these books, for me, it's become quite important for me to like ID trees, especially because I'm foraging for it. I think it's just helpful to get to know the environment around you, but I feel like for me, I really want to get to know the types of trees that I have around, because a lot of them are related to different types of fungi. So sometimes a way to ID fungi and just the different mushrooms that you're finding is by getting to know what trees are around you. So this is pretty helpful. It's a chunky one to carry around, but I bring this one around and they're the guides that I'd have with me. Not all of them, maybe I'd bring like the tree and the wildflower one and the mushroom one. I kind of don't use the complete wildlife with this one. I wouldn't use this one as much, but I'd bring the other ones with me if I'm out foraging or if I'm just out in nature and want to get to know my environment a little bit more. One of the ways that are also helpful in foraging is Facebook groups. But there's like groups on mushrooms, groups on different wildflowers, and basically what people often do is they take pictures of the plant from different angles or the fungi from different angles and whatever environment it's in, if it's fungi, the tree that it's beside, etc., etc., and you post a picture on there and you just ask people, if you're not like 100% sure that it's that plant, what that is, that plant or that fungi or whatever you're looking at, whatever it is you're looking at, if you're not 100% sure, you'll post it on there and people will help you to ID it. But again, it's pretty important to take pictures of it from like different angles and just the environment that it's in. But yeah, those groups have been pretty helpful for me as well, especially for fungi. If I'm not like 100% sure but I'm 99% sure, I'll post it on there and people have been pretty helpful. I think with foraging, what I'm finding is that it's a lot of trial and error, especially if you're trying to process food. Like I've processed food before and it hasn't turned out great the way I would have liked it to. Or I went off and I foraged these flowers, fireweed, and I dried them, but they caught like a mold, so I mustn't have dried them enough. So yeah, sometimes it can be a lot of trial and error when you're trying to process the foods, and it's just something that I guess that I'm willing to go through and learn more about. And it can be so frustrating when you put so much time and effort into something and then having to throw it out. I hate having to do that, but it is a process, and it's a process of learning. So yeah, I guess there's some of the drawbacks, and it's not a perfect process by any means. I think another thing actually that I figured out when foraging is that I have to make sure that I have enough time in the next few days. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, this is great, I have enough time to forage like this food, but then I need to make sure that I have like a couple of hours in the next couple of days to like process it, to dry it out, or to make something with it. So that, yeah, I guess that's one of the things as well. It's like just having enough time. It's not just the actual picking itself and then it's done and dusted. It's like, it's actually a lot of work and it takes a long time. But I think that's something that I was kind of like, oh yeah, I need to have a lot more time than I planned for this. And yeah, that's something that I want to share with you too. Some other things that came to my mind that I really want to share about foraging is actually my fear of eating wild food. So even with like, I come from such a disconnected place because I live in such a disconnected world. So I have a bit of like health anxiety too. So foraging has really brought that up for me. And even with nettles, like they're stingy, so I'm like, oh, eating something that's stingy, that's, yeah, it can be a lot. And I think there's so much fear around it, and then there's obviously so much fear around picking up the wrong thing. And that's why I think having loads of these resources can be really helpful, and going with somebody that you know can really build up confidence inside of you. But starting small with like something that maybe you grew up picking, like apples or berries or nettles, I think can be really helpful. Yeah, I think foraging can feel really foreign, and it's something that's new for me, and it brings up a lot of fear. And I think there has been so much fear mongering around nature and like dirt and all of that, so there's a lot of challenges that come up with foraging that I think it's a lot of work to do within yourself, and a lot of barriers that you have to break for yourself when you're foraging. That's what I've been finding. I think as well, it's important to be, if you're going to go out foraging, it's important to be respectful of the environment that you're in. Make sure you're not damaging the plants. Yeah, make sure that you're not damaging anything in the environment around you. And there is like rules to foraging that you can find online if you look them up. But I think as foragers, it's so important that we're respectful of the environment that we're in, that we're not going in and damaging it, and also to remember that like a lot of the animals and bugs around, they rely on a lot of those foods that we're foraging. And then also to not like forage in an area where you feel like there's not enough, it's not abundant. Maybe leaving those areas for the wilderness around. And yeah, I think overall just walking into these wild areas with love and respect for nature is really important, and to look at it as something that, to not look at it in this way that we're just like taking this like greedy way of just like, let's just take as much as we can, but more so as well think of it like, is there anything that I can bring to the place where I'm foraging from, whether it's an offering or if it's you bringing maybe a bag and picking up any litter that you see around, just in a way of like connecting with these areas more, rather than just looking them as areas that we just take from. So I think that's also looking at it in that perspective, and foraging is really teaching me this way of connecting with the earth and looking at it from that perspective where I can be in nature and not like just take from nature the way we have been as humans for quite a long time. But yeah, I really wanted to share how I'm learning how to forage, and also why I forage, and share some resources that I have and that have been helping me on this journey of reconnecting. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Take care, and here's to us reconnecting with our green thumbs and our green selves.